Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
Now let's give a warm welcome to our main speaker, Clancy I.
My name is Clancy Imislund, and I'm an alcoholic. I'm glad to be here tonight. This is always kind of a sentimental time for me to be at Malibu. Some years ago, this time of year, I got my first birthday cake at this meeting. I was thinking of tonight, I don't know what made me so pensive about it, but I was thinking about watching these kids get their first birthday cakes and knowing that we don't know which ones, but a couple of them will be drunk. And maybe one will make it, because that's just, if we don't know which one, that's the funny part about it. I think of all the people I knew in the Malibu group all those years ago, and I don't know where one of them is now. And it sounds funny, but it isn't really very funny, because you maybe want them to go out and it won't be anywhere near as funny then. And you would think that why would people get sober and not stay here? And it has always been a great problem in AA. You know, it's a hard thing to remember that this program works inexorably, I think. But you look at the first edition of the book, Alcoholics Anonymous, that big red book, and the stories in the back, most of them died drunk. Most of the people who wrote the stories in the second printing died drunk. As Dr. Bob said later, we were just kind of blindly going along, trying by trial and error, trying to find out what had worked. By the time they wrote this book and had it fairly well organized, by 1950, say, they had a cohesive program that seemed to be working. And it has worked ever since. There's a lot of people sober all over the world. And it's an amazing thing that people don't have an ability to stay here. Many people don't. I sometimes get very upset with people who don't seem to be able to stay sober. And then I have to remember, if sobriety could be related to or communicated by good wishes, why did I slip year after year after year after year after year? The worst years of my life came after good people were taking me to Alcoholics Anonymous and were trying to help me and sharing with me, and all it did for me was just, I could not accept their help, I guess. I suppose I look back at my life, one of the great problems I had in my life is because I've always had an apparent defiance. I defy the people, defy what they're doing, defy what they're telling me if I don't agree with it. And I'm very defiant. I remember I've looked back and thought about that many times because it all very nearly killed me. And I think one of the great reasons for that defiance was that I always had kind of an inner sense of weakness. I never felt I was quite enough somehow. And I felt if I gave in to people, they would see that. So you become defiant. I got in a lot of fights in bars that I had no business being in, because if a guy implied to me I was weak, I'd be ready to go with him. Let's go, come on. And on and on. And when people give me advice, unless I agree with it, I defy it. It's nonsense, it's ridiculous. I look back and I realize now in my life, only strong people can afford to be weak. Weak people can't afford to be weak. They have to be strong. They have to keep proving there's something. One of the things alcohol did for me, it made me something. I was thinking, listening to our young lady who spoke first, we had considerably different background. She came from a trailer park in San Bernardino. I came from a very strict religious home up in northern Wisconsin. Norwegian Lutheran church, very strict. I didn't know it was strict, it's the only church I knew. And I grew up in this church, and they only really had two rules that I ever heard of. You don't sin, and you don't talk to Catholics. Seems reasonable if you want to go to heaven. And I didn't mind it, seemed reasonable, and as I got a little older, I realized there was something different about me because I seemed to need more fun than other Lutherans somehow. And pretty soon I got sinning, then I got monking with Catholics, then I got sinning with Catholics, which turned out to be a lot easier than I thought it would. And by the time I was 15, I was kind of a wild kid. Not a wild kid, I was a very straight-laced kid, but I mean, I thought I was wild. And the war started, and I hitchhiked to San Francisco, told my mother I was going to Superior, Wisconsin to visit my aunt, and I hitchhiked to San Francisco. Small little pimply-faced dummy, and lied my age, got seamen's papers. They were crying for seamen. And I was on a ship going to the South Pacific before my mother knew I wasn't up in Superior. And on that ship, I learned a lot of things. It got me to drink some whiskey for the first time, and it made me puke. And they laughed at me, which made me feel bad. So all the way across the Central Pacific, I would sneak into this guy's sea bag about once a day and take a drink of whiskey. I wanted so bad to look like a man to these people. And I'd throw it up. And as we were coming into Pearl Harbor, they were still digging up ships off the bottom. And all the men were upstairs and up on the main deck, and I was down in the cabin. I took another drink. And I remember that was the day before my 16th birthday. And I took a drink of whiskey and I held it down. And then I couldn't breathe. Oh, Jesus. I thought, why do they drink it? Then all of a sudden something strange happened. I found myself feeling significantly better. And I realized that's why people drink whiskey, I guess. When you're a kid in your teens, you just learn things. You don't have great import, Well, I remember a few years ago, I heard a guy talk, and he said, when I held that drink of alcohol down, I knew I'd gone into a new garden of experience with many flowers and fruits to be savored in the coming years. And when I left that garden eventually to come to this wonderful program, I shall always remember it with mixed love and devotion. I thought, God damn it, I never knew those things. Yet all I knew is if you drink and if you don't puke and you can breathe, it makes you feel better. That's what I learned. Well, it took you long enough, Matt. Matt, there's no sweetener in this. Come on. I don't see any future for AA. Nothing personal, man. But I'd learned to drink a little bit, and I learned to smoke on that ship, and I smoked and puked and smoked and puked and learned to smoke. I learned to lust effectively on that trip. I had lusted a lot before that, but not effectively, but I mean, at the age of 15 in Eau Claire, Wisconsin, I'd had sex, but I'd been apprehensive and afraid and alone, and these guys were showing me how I could really do it with people. And then later I got another ship, and I got a little more wise to what's going on, and when I was 17, I joined the Navy, and I learned a lot there, and at the end of the war, I was in the Naval Hospital up in Northern California being sewed together, and they passed around some tests. I've always been good on tests, so I did very well, and they gave me a high school equivalency diploma, which I didn't think much of at the time, but it changed my life, because I've often thought about that. If I hadn't done that, I'd have had to go back to Eau Claire, Wisconsin after the war. Thank you, man. Don't get any bother for me. I'd had to go back to Eau Claire, Wisconsin after the war and they wanted me to start my junior year of high school again. I never would have done that. I was too slick by that time. But I said I went to college after the war. It was a great year to go to college, fall of 1946. All these millions of veterans all went to college for a while. Most of them did, and you sit around and dazzle little kids just out of high school, You'd go to freshman English class, there'd be some old Marine Corps sergeant there sitting there. Some little girl from Plaque, River Falls High School. Were you in the war? Yeah. Do you put out? It's just terrible. But I like college. I won some trophies in college at the University of Wisconsin. And I met this girl with coal black hair and coal black flashing eyes. I'd never seen anyone so mysterious. And she won my heart. And after she won my heart, she dropped the bombshell on me. She said, I'm a Catholic. And I writhed in the net for a while, but finally gave in, and we got married. And My grandmother went into a depression for about 2 years. And I went out in the world. I became a sports writer, newspaper sports writer, which is still my favorite job I'd ever had, I guess. And then I was really enjoying it. Then my wife began to show the first terrible strain, the tendency of a Catholic. She began to have children with remarkable frequency. I became a national distributor of small Catholics. So I had to get better jobs. I got into advertising and public relations over the years. I worked in some agencies and so on. And I had some successes. And all these years I drank, because drinking always made me feel like something. Drinking, for people like me who never feel like I'm quite enough, when I have a few drinks, I have a tendency to feel like I'm more than enough. Hey, baby. What a good feeling after being a wussy all day to be a little something at night. Takes a person like me who lives with a lot of fear. Not only fear of the normal things, but fear of exposure, fear of people say that I'm not as slick as I pretend to be. When I have a few drinks, I become fearless. I fight cops. I do all sorts. I jump off balconies into swimming pools, and don't have a swimming pool, I'll jump on your lawn. Shit makes no difference to me. Just go. When I'm sober, I have a tendency to be very, very sensitive to rejection. I'm sure some of you must have that feeling too. I can see rejection where nobody can see rejection. I can hear it in a tone of voice, my feelings are always being hurt. I feel rejected. When I have a few drinks, that all changes. It's what a difference. I don't know better. The best example, I must have said this 1,000 times over the years, but I don't know a better way to say it. I'm sure it's happened to some guys in this room. Be sitting at a bar late at night, maybe having a few drinks, and thinking how they're screwing you around down to the office. Brown nosers seem to be getting ahead. Men of integrity being held back. Every few drinks, you notice a miracle slowly taking place in front of your eye. Some old beast gradually becomes beautiful. I might sidle over to such an old queen at closing time and imply there will be delights beyond her comprehension if she'd like to join me in the old Chevy. If she would say no, God, if I were sober, I'd just say, oh, I'm so sorry. Look, I'm cutting my wrist. I'm sorry. When I've had a few drinks, though, it's all different. She says, no, I don't feel rejected. I feel sorry for her. Too bad, bitch, don't come begging tomorrow. What a great feeling that is to feel like something. And sometimes I drink too much, and then people think I act bizarre. I was sent to my first AA meeting, and nobody knew what it was even, but they knew there was an AA meeting. They thought it'd help me not act bizarre, to drink without acting bizarre. So I went to my first AA meeting in the fall of 1949. That's a long time ago. Most of you weren't even born. We love you. And I don't know what I expected to find there, but I found a bunch of old fools in their 40s with some with gray hair, and I thought I heard the same thing newcomers think they hear today, I stayed drunk around the clock for 20 years. One day I walked through that door, and they told me to put the plug in the jug, and I did. And I've just never felt so goddamn wonderful. And if you understand, why don't you tell your face, But I went to AA for a while, but I realized I was different than these people. For a couple of years, I spent a lot of thousands of dollars in psychoanalysis to get to the root of my insecurities and fears and found out how I got them. Really helps. It's good to find out why you're that way. It doesn't help you, but it's like peeing your pants on a street corner. It serves no lasting purpose. It makes you feel warm while you do it. I read books. As a backslid Lutheran, I always knew I was going to go to hell, so I was really thrilled to run across Nietzsche, who was an old German philosopher, one of his characters says, "Why are you so concerned about God? God is dead. Perhaps he once existed to set the orbs to whirl, but look about you. Just natural law. All the rest is anarchy." And I remember reading, God, that's good news. I hope that's true, because I won't go to hell. In fact, there's a theological seminary in Chicago. I was there last Saturday night in Chicago. And it says, "God is dead," signed Friedrich Nietzsche, 1884. Unfortunately, beneath it, it says, "Nietzsche's dead," signed God, 1906. Yeah. Well, I drank and went to therapy and intermittently went to AA meetings when the heat was on. I went to a lot of AA meetings, a lot of states. And I had some ups and downs and victories and defeats. And I went up and down, but I was a pretty good writer. I could always bounce back and get that resume and those samples, be in a new city and be slicker and snot. And one day I went down in Dallas, of all places, and I didn't come back up. I met a young lady here tonight from Dallas. I was going to punch her. And I don't know, I couldn't believe this. Within a matter of a couple of weeks, my wife had taken the children and left while I was out in the drunk one night. They never did that before. I left them sometimes. They repossessed my car. I was evicted out of my house. It was terrible. And I had no way to go. I look back now, and I always thought I was kind of going like this, up and down, you know. But I must have been going like this, because when I hit that bottom, it went bad. And I didn't know how to get out of Dallas even. But they used to have deals where you could look in the paper that you could drive cars places for people. A drive away. And I got a car for Los Angeles. So I drove a car to El Paso, where I had some friends and got drunk, and drove on to Phoenix and got drunk and lost the car in Phoenix. And I got in a beef on the street car with some guy who turned out to be a cop, and he threw me in jail overnight. In the middle of the night, I vomited on a guy's bed, and he kicked my front teeth out to encourage me not to do that anymore. And the next day I got up, and I was sick and desperate. I had no place to go. I looked up the AA club. That's the only place you can go when you look that bad and pretend to be a newcomer. And I went over there, and some old lady said, "You need some help?" I said, "Yes, I'm a new person. If I had some money for a 12-step house, I want to work the program." So she gave me a few bucks, and I bought a bus ticket to Los Angeles. And I got to Los Angeles. There was a guy I knew at KFWB, a big honcho, big top star of the day, and I'd given him his start. And I went out there and got some dough for myself. I got a little accident. I'll get my clothes tomorrow. And I was around town. I was out in Santa Monica, out in the Ocean Park. Didn't know where the hell I was. Some place called the Tender Loving Care Club, which turned into Synanon late next year. And I wound up and drunk, and I went back to Ted Quillen, and he said, "Get out of here, you're a bum." And I didn't know where I was. One morning I found myself in a situation that a person of my background and intelligence and ability could not be in. Two big guys were throwing me out of a Skid Row mission and said, "And stay out of here, you damn bum." And I tried to explain to him, I'm not a bum. 3 years ago I was on the faculty of the University of Texas. Ads that I helped write, the old L.C. Delmer ads for the Borden Company, were running that very week in Life and Time and Starting Post. I've had my picture in the New York Times for one of my achievements. How many people do you know have had their picture in the New York Times? But it's hard to explain these things in midair. You know? And I stood outside of that damn mission. It was a cold morning, like a little drizzle like there was yesterday, only about that cold. And our first speaker, I guess one of the first speaker, maybe one of the first people said tonight, of having a feeling like there's no place to go. There is no friendly direction, which is as bad a feeling as I know. I could not think of a direction where anybody was who cared what happened to me. And you think, well, sure, you're on Skid Row, but I've had that happen to guys I sponsor who are still making $1 million a year with the same feeling. A butler got me into a room up in the Hollywood Hills with a guy with Oscars and New York Theater Awards all over the wall. And he told me the same thing as he crouched in his bed and cried. There's nobody. And I didn't know what to do. And I remember vaguely that I'd been in somebody take me to an AA club, and I hung around there, got drunk and got thrown out. But I didn't want to go there. If some old guy had come up to me that morning and said, "You know, Slim, you're dying. You're down to about 125 pounds. You've lost your wife and children. You'll never see them again. You've lost your career. Once upon a time, they called you a boy genius. Now you can't even get a job washing dishes. You've lost your clothing somewhere. It must be in that car in Dallas or someplace, or Phoenix, but you'll never see him again. You've lost your front teeth. Even if you get some clothes, nobody's going to hire you. You look like a bum. You're sick. You got open sores on your face. You're an only child, and your mother's not allowed to accept phone calls from you anymore because your stepfather's so tired of watching you manipulate her and then break her heart one more time. Why don't you, you've been in and out of AA for years, 10 years. Why don't you just go back to AA, 9 years, go back to AA and admit you're an alcoholic and do something about it? And if my life depended on it, and it was necessary for me to tell the truth, I had to say, pal, it isn't the way it looks. I know there's something wrong with me. I've known it since I was a boy, but it isn't alcohol. I thought it was, but it isn't. After years ago, I realized it wasn't alcohol. There's something wrong with me. If he'd have said, well, prove you're not an alcoholic, I wouldn't have been able to do that. I wouldn't have had the objectivity to stand back and examine myself. So I probably would have taken refuge behind the armor that frightened people like me do when we're cornered. We say things like, get out of my face. Screw you, son of a bitch. Because I don't know the right answer. I know the right answer now, why I knew I wasn't an alcoholic. I've known it for a long time, and I've seen it myself and many others, for a very simple reason. Because I'd been to many AA meetings, and I knew what an alcoholic was, and I wasn't that. Nothing mysterious, nothing ethereal, just quite pragmatic. So that begs the question, well, what's an alcoholic? Everybody knows what an alcoholic is. There always seem to be people who drink too much and can't handle it, and they get in trouble, and they get eventually sent to places like AA, and AA sober them up, and they clean up their act, and they feel better. I mean, the specifics vary, but it's always, I've heard that many times. So have you, the newest person here's heard that. I drank a lot, it really was terrible. I came to AA and cleaned up my act, and now I'm feeling better. And I could equate a lot with AA in some ways. I drank badly, and I got in a lot of trouble. But I couldn't, of all the integrity I'd sold out, that one little tattered shred, I couldn't admit I was really an alcoholic, because I knew I wasn't. Because of one reason. Unlike alcoholics, it is when I get sober and clean up my act, that's when my life gets painful. And that's when my emotions get out of whack. And the longer I try to be good, it gets so bad I can't stand it. Once in Texas, I was in jail one night and my son died, and I felt so bad I stopped drinking so long that I finally wound up committing suicide and being brought back to life and put in the state insane asylum. Now that is not an alcohol problem, folks. That's something else. That's being sick in your head, some emotional sickness. And but nobody came over and talked to me that morning. I just stood there in the rain. And I thought, I got to go to that club or I'm going to die. And I said, where's Wilshire in Fairfax? I had no idea where it was. He said, well, yeah, Wilshire doesn't come through. You have to go up to Hill Street and cut over to Wilshire and then walk west for a long ways. And I did that. I counted later in my car, there's 72 blocks. That's a long way to walk when you're sick and desperate. A woman in New York asked me a couple years ago, God, how could you possibly walk that far when you were so desperate? Of course, the answer is quite simple. That's the only time you can. You could do it no other time. But when you're desperate, you'll do what you do. And I walked in that club and I was repelled again. Not only was it a bad club, but it was full of AA fanatics. I know of nothing more disgusting to an intelligent slipper than to be thrown amongst AA fanatics. Keep coming back. Live and let live. First things first. Ha ha ha. The program works. And I hung around that club till it stopped raining. That night, I went to one of their meetings and ate about 4 pounds of cake. And there's somebody talking about God. That night, there was somebody pointed out an abandoned car in the AA club parking lot, and I slept in that all night. Got up in the morning, came to the club, ate about 4 pounds of cake, and had another meeting in that night. Tried to stay out of sight, and that night there was another meeting. And this went on for days. It never stopped raining. I remember thinking, maybe I'm dead. Maybe I'm dead. Maybe my grandmother was right after all. Maybe. And I had no idea then or thereafter that would be my sobriety date, because I never intended for it to be my sobriety date. Of all the times I ever got sober, that was the least time I ever wanted to stay sober, because there's no reason to stay sober anymore. I don't suppose anybody who's ever slipped as long as I did, who's now stayed sober as long as I have. In fact, I was almost tempted tonight to get a birthday cake here, because I did get my birthday cake here. But I didn't think they had 40 candles in the house, so I didn't. But I've been sober a long time, 40 years now, since I took that walk off Skid Row. And you might look back and think, what was different this time? What was different? Remember, a woman in Toronto, again at a meeting, asked me that. She said, I don't want one of your long answers. Could you just give me a simple sentence what was different? And because when I answer questions, I have a tendency to talk till I can think of the answer. But I could not think of the answer that day, and I thought of the answer that night in a shower, but it was such an unhappy answer, I didn't even like it. It's such a dreary, grubby little answer. I like answers that have body and strength and dynamic neon qualities. And, I want people to go home from the meeting saying, did you hear what Clancy said tonight? Never mind if the horse is blind, keep loading the wagon. Yeah. It means nothing, but it's got body and strength. Remember this, newcomer, wet birds don't fly at night. Yeah. And the answer I came up with really is such a grubby little answer, it's just, I almost hate to tell you. This was the first time I began to do things I disagreed with and I thought were dumb. That's not a very big reason, is it? But yet that changed my life. I didn't realize at the time, now, do you think I had some wave of dynamic interest? No. What saved my life, I was thrown amongst those damn AA fanatics. I would not call them fanatics tonight, I would call them AA winners. There's a lot of new people here tonight, a lot of slippers here. Let me give you a suggestion. You hear this again and again. Stick with the winners. Stick with the winners. But who are the winners? Who knows? They don't wear signs. You think, well, the people who have been sober the longest. Sometimes they are, and sometimes they're not. I know people that have been sober a long time who used to be really good AAs, and they've let themselves atrophy and are now bitter, sour old fools. I tell newcomers, stay away from him. I don't care how many years he's got. He's got nothing to tell you but poison. Who are the winners? Well, the winners, as far as I can determine, are the people who are sitting in these meetings on a continuing basis, who came here feeling bad and lost and desperate and somehow allowed themselves to be guided into doing things they thought seemed kind of dumb. And little by little, their perceptions change almost imperceptibly. And now they come here by choice on a continuing basis, and they look for new people to try to convince to do the same things. And they also will tell you, stay away from the losers. Stay away from the losers. Well, who are the losers? Sometimes they're fun people. Sometimes they're effervescent people. I'll tell you one phrase, if you hear this, you stay away from that person as long as you can. And it's just a simple phrase. Oh, you don't have to do all that stuff. You don't have to do all those things, because they'll kill you. They will literally kill you, and they will stay here and you will die, or wish you were dead, which is even worse. But why would you want to stay with these winners? Because they are activists, because they do things, and when you got not much going for you, you're like a chameleon, you just take on their stupid actions for something to do, I remember standing in that club 4 or 5 weeks after I was sober, and had a great burst one night about 7 o'clock. You know something? I'm sick of this stuff. I'm nothing. I'm leaving an abandoned car. I'm not going to go to any more meetings. I'm sick of those meetings. I'm sick of this hypocrisy. I'm sick of these phonies and the damn stuff. If I got to hold up a liquor store, hold up a gas station, get some front teeth, get a suit, go back in New York, start writing again. But I'll die on this damn street. And I had it just in my mind, and I heard a voice say, come on, Clancy, get in the car. We're all going to the meeting. Come on, Clancy, we're going to help Fred move his furniture. Oh, shit. Just on and on and on. Hideous. I stayed sober somehow, just hideous. You get to the point where they say, get a sponsor, get a sponsor. I used to see this actor. He was a character actor who came in the club, and he always played loving brothers-in-law and uncles, giving people money, and a nice guy. Maybe I can get him to stake me this from front teeth and some clothes. I said, Bob, would you be my sponsor? He said, yeah, I will, but you got to do what I say. Oh, sure, Bob. I tell you, he should have won the Academy Award for every loving role he ever played in the movie. He turned out to be a right-wing fascist AA pig. Jesus Christ. There was never any rest with him. I look. intimidate me and get me to do things and stupid things. And I look back and think, why would I take that crap from that guy? I don't take crap from people because I'm defiant, I'm tough. In those days and in much of my life, my theory is this: I like people who like me. I think they're stupid, but I like them. I got no respect for them, but I like them. I hate people who can see through me and see my weakness and how about a phony I am. I begrudgingly respect him, but I hate him. And this guy had the ability to see through me and pointed it out from time to time, and it just made me hate him. But he also seemed to like me. He'd give me a pat on the back now and then. I did things for a pat on the back from that old fool I wouldn't have done for my mother or for a job or for nothing. Good job, kid. When I was about 6 months sober, I got fired as a dishwasher at the Gaiety Delicatessen after a 2-day run. And I'd go to commit suicide, and my sponsor used that pain to convince me to write an inventory. I called him up and said, Bob, what am I going to do? He said, why don't you write your inventory? And I just told him a week before, I've taken my inventory with a psychiatrist. Why should I take it with the out-of-work actor, for Christ's sake? What good's that going to do? That made him cross. He was always cross. But I said, Bob, in my judgment, that's the last thing in the world I need. My God, Bob, I'm so full of remorse and regret I've ruined my life. He says, in your judgment? Who cares about your judgment? You live in an abandoned car, for Christ's sake. If I wanted your judgment, I'd put my head in the back window and ask you for it. And he got me so upset that I came out of that phone booth. Good thing I didn't turn right. I would have thrown myself in the ocean when I turned left and got to the income. Give me some paper. I'm right by inventory. And I wrote slimy, dirty, petty, nasty little things I'd never told a soul. People said, why don't you tell your psychiatrist those things? Because when you're paying that kind of money, you can't risk rejection. That's why. You did what, sir? Get out of my office. But wait a minute. First, wash that chair. You know. And a week later, he came by the club and says, hop in, kid. I'd shoved it under a seat where nobody'd ever see it again. And he said, hop in, we're going to take your 5th step. I don't feel like doing it, Bob. Shut up. And he drove from Santa Monica to Oxnard along this road, gave me a flashlight. Just read it. And I read this. Oh, it just made me want to puke. We got to that big rock up there, just outside Oxnard, and I thought, he's going to make me, I got all that past the end of it. I thought he's going to make me get out of his car and walk home. And he reached over and says, that's the best thing you did since you got sober, kid. I thought so, Bob. I've taken that trip about over 200 times since then, up this road, with other boobs, with me in the driver's seat, and then with a flashlight. Let me explain this part before I read it. It's an amazing thing. You'll find that inventories are all the same, and people get drunk and die rather than take one because they're so convinced they're different. The specifics vary, but they're always the same. Lack of self-worth, fear, guilt, and occasional lashing out at the world to punish them for what you've done to me. The specifics always vary, but they're always there. One week, a few years ago, I listened to a daughter of the most famous man of the 20th century on that trip, and a week later with a guy just out of the Washington Penitentiary, didn't know who his father was. He was born under a bridge in El Paso. Same inventory, entirely different specifics. That's what makes AA such work, I do believe. It works at a level considerably beneath the superficial things we see. I've been sober a lot of years, and I've been active all these years, so I've had the opportunity to do some things that most of you haven't had a chance to do yet. For example, the last few years I've been asked to come and speak in exotic places like Cape Town and Johannesburg and Berlin and London and Paris. And last month I was in England, or in Ireland, a guy here from Ireland, and New Zealand, earlier this summer was New Zealand and Australia and Mexico and Canada, but a lot of places. And I'll tell you, you'd think you'd find a lot of exotic AA in all these places, but except for the accents, you hear exactly the same emotions you hear in this meeting tonight. people who are afraid. Some are afraid. Some don't know what to do. Some are trying to console them. Some just interested in being slick and hip and cool no matter what happens, and on and on. Every group seems to evolve down to, in one sense or another, a group of people who believe in AA and for whom it's working, a group of fringers who are more interested in standing up in the patios of the various meetings and being slick and coming in late for the tradition of being cute, and newcomers. And both of these forces fight for their souls. And it's that way all over the world. But I took that inventory. I didn't know it would be a turning spot, but it was. And did some more steps. And little by little, I stayed sober. I didn't do very well for a long time. By the time I was 2 years sober, I finally got a little job as a writer at a medical corporation. And my sponsor gave me some great direction. I'm going to hear some great spiritual instructions. If you're new, listen to this. You think spiritual instruction, meditation and prayer. That's true, part of it. Let me tell you some really big ones. Do what you said you would do. Be where you said you would be, when you said you would be there, or let them know you're not going to be there. Don't take out your hostility on people who can't answer back. Children, employees, waiters and waitresses. When you know you're having a bad day, watch that mouth, because we can all cut people to death without even being aware of it, and on and on. And I finally didn't learn it very well. I learned well enough to become director of advertising for that corporation. And when I was 6 years sober, I was brought into Revell to create a big toy kit manufacturer. When I was 7 years sober, another guy and I were brought into Hollywood. We created something called Boss Radio, became the #1 hard rock station in the world. We all wore shiny suits and said things like, "What's coming on down, baby?" I was 10 years sober. I was downtown doing public relations for oil companies. 15 years sober. I was a marketing director in Beverly Hills. When I was 5 years sober, the same wife and all those children heard the crinkle of green in my wallet all the way to Dallas. Rushed to my side. 9 months and 10 seconds later, another Catholic hit the street. And then, unfortunately, I was 15 years sober, and I was doing so well that AA turned my head. It got me screwed up. I found myself leaving a job in Beverly Hills, and for the last 25 years, I run the mission on Skid Row that threw me out in 1958. And people say, "Why would you give up this career to run that goddamn mission?" I have never been thinking of a good answer. I think, well, you know, such a significant decrease in salary, I thought it was spiritual. But the greatest thing I've learned in all these years, in my first year I learned I was an alcoholic because I discovered the problem was something different than I thought. I could always prove my problem was not alcohol, and it turned out it wasn't. It was something called alcoholism, which sounds the same but has a much different approach. Alcohol problems are overcome by getting sober. Alcoholism is exacerbated by getting sober. That's what AA is about. That's what makes alcoholism a fatal disease. If getting sober is the answer, detoxes would turn out winners. But it turns out that sobriety gets so painful that eventually it gets worse than the drinking. You got to get a little relief to keep from going crazy. And what AA is about, you're not 80, it's sober. Toilets get you sober. Being sober is the entrance to AA. I don't care how many people tell you that it doesn't count what you take or what you sniff or what you smoke as long as you're off alcohol. The purpose here, as far as I know, and I might be the only one in the room who ever sat and talked to Bill Wilson about it for an hour in his office in 1963, is to come in here with a clean head, with an unhindered head in reality, and learn to live in reality. And that's what AA is about. That's what these steps are about. We're running a little late, but I want to, one of those birthday people talk 10 seconds overtime. That's why. There he is, right over there. I just want to close by saying something. It's kind of an interesting little thought, I think. People say, well, how does AA work? And it's very easy to say, chapter 5, there it is. But they don't mean how it works. They mean, why does it work? And I'm sure everybody in this room has the question from time to time, why does this work? There are much better things that don't work. Why does this work? And I think of the old story, it's kind of an analogy. In the 1700s, the worst disease that could happen, that was happening in the world, was smallpox, the most lethal. I mean, bubonic plague was bad, but that only came once every few hundred years. Smallpox came quite often, and they just wipe out cities and areas. In Philadelphia, I remember reading books about wagons just going through, bring out your dead, and just throw your body, your mother and dad's body in there and hope you won't get it. They had no idea what germs were, bacteria. In London, a doctor named Edward Jenner noticed a funny thing. He says, a funny thing, girls who milk cows don't get smallpox. Now, why the hell should that be? Why should girls who milk cows? And he talked to them all, and he finally realized they'd all had something called cowpox, which was kind of a mild inflammation they got. And he thought, that's the only thing they have in common. But there's no, because they didn't understand germs or bacteria. They thought diseases were caused by air, by the moon, by all sorts of things. But he bought a little boy named Jimmy Phipps, 9 years old, and he took him down to the smallpox, where the girls had cowpox, cut a little hole in his arm, and took pus off the girl with cowpox and rubbed it in there. Thought maybe that would give it to him. And of course he got cowpox. Then he got better. Then he took him down to the smallpox death ward where they were dying of smallpox. Cut a little hole in his arm, rubbed some pus from someone dying, and the boy got smallpox briefly and got better. And that day they realized that's how you keep from getting smallpox, you get cowpox. Nobody knew why for 150 years after that, but they knew that. So they began giving people cowpox by rubbing cowpox in their arm. Here's an interesting thought to take home with you. The Roman word for cow is vacus. That's where the term vaccination comes from, insertion of the cow. About 100 years later, 150 years later, they finally discovered bacteria and germs. Oh yes, it turns out smallpox sets up antibodies that prevent smallpox from killing you. Oh, that's nice. But a lot of people would have been dead waiting for that to understand why. And I sometimes, that's the thing about AA. I don't know why AA works. Maybe someday, 150 years from now, some wise man will discover that a series of actions and beliefs, when done in a proper order, under proper auspices, set up a flood of endorphins to the cerebral cortex or some goddamn thing. I don't know. But I know I can't afford to wait to find out. I know that this works. And if you're new tonight, there's always going to be people say, A's for your drinking, but you got to do some other things for your emotions. Once upon a time, I was committed to spend the rest of my life in the Texas State Insane Asylum in Big Spring, Texas. I've been in 4 veterans hospitals in locked psychiatric wards. I've been in a psychiatric Navy ward. I've been chained down. I think I can speak on behalf of those who are emotionally disturbed. Speaking on behalf of those who are emotionally disturbed, let me say this. No matter what anybody tells you, I can tell you from personal experience, AA, as it is, if you run with the winners and do the things and allow yourself to surrender, will work at least for 40 years and 3 weeks. I don't know about any longer than that, but it'll work that long. Do it.
Thank you, Clancy. Yeah, thank you, Clancy.
Sorry to interrupt your viewing. Taper Dave here. Just wanted to take a second to ask you to like and subscribe to my channel. Let me know if you like what you're listening. I've got some very good talks here, and this one's a great one. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Tell me what you think. Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with. And it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone, through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control is connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs. Long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst, then one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, oop, out, in, up, down, and then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. I don't know if that shows up. The gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right, but I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.